My name is Tom, and I'm an alcoholic. Well, my wife's not surprised that I did this, I'm sure. Mr. Klutz. Anyway, I'd like to thank the committee, especially Bob, for his kind invitation to come here this afternoon and tell this dreary story. Been telling it a long time. I've been telling it a lot. I've been to a lot of meetings. I was kind of touched today. I listened to Diane's talk yesterday, and wonderful talk last night. And our backgrounds seem to be so different, our upbringings and how we drank and how we, I guess, lived our lives. And I guess if you're looking for the differences, I guess there's plenty of them too. But I ended up, of course, identifying with everybody's talk, as I think most of us that stay in Alcoholics Anonymous do. I look around here today, and it looks like I'm at a young people's meeting, pretty much, by the looks of their faces. I guess it was about a month or two ago, I had to give a talk at a little conference in Orange County, and I was a speaker at what they call the old timers meeting. And I didn't like that particular. I like to feel like I'm a newcomer, like I'm, I don't like an old timer, all that means. And I was complaining to my wife about I don't like the expression old timer. She said, well, how about early comer? And I said, old timer will do. It'll be just fine. Just like that. I'd like to welcome especially the newer people that are here today, maybe for their first few months in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's quite a place. I think all of us go back and look at how we were when we came in, and I was as sick as most anybody else can be, I suppose. But it's hard to believe that I could have ever ended up being an alcoholic. I don't have any reason to be an alcoholic. I don't have any stuff in the family that would make me an alcoholic. My father had little or no use for the people that drank. I think his father was probably a classic periodic, but he just didn't drink. My dad didn't drink. My mother didn't drink very much, if at all. It just wasn't in our experience. I think the biggest problem my mom and dad had when they were having a party was what kind of cake she was going to bake to have with the tea and coffee. And that was the kind of like the upbringing that I had in West Los Angeles in this Irish Catholic home, and which makes me different. But my brother and sister drank, and I remember they used to give parties. I must have been probably 8, 9, 10 years old, and they'd give parties, and I'd go around and drink out of their glasses, and I don't remember whether it did anything for me or to me or anything about it. I just know that I enjoyed doing it. And it's been, a few years ago since I was doing that, but I always knew that I liked to drink. I liked the way it tasted. I liked the way it made me feel and all that sort of stuff. And I still have a problem today when people try to tell me that everybody doesn't like alcohol the way I like alcohol. I just don't understand that intellectually. We all joke, or they say, oh, no, I don't care for another one. I'm beginning to feel it and all that kind of stuff. I just loved it. I just loved every part of it. And, of course, when you're just in grammar school, it's a little hard to drink and get it, but I found a way going to people's houses and stealing it out of their homes and stuff like that in the neighborhood. And I went on this way. I got out of grammar school. I went to, I guess I was screwing around pretty badly in West Los Angeles, so they shipped me off to New York to this rich man's reform school, is the way I could see it. My sister was a very well-known movie actress in the late 30s and 40s, and she wanted me to get a good education and get some, I guess, discipline, so they sent me to this military school out in Long Island. And I got into New York City on weekends, and I loved to go into New York City, and this was in the late 40s and early 50s, and I loved to go into the Sovereign Bar and order a beer. That was the start of my weekend. And I was just a kid, but I looked a little older, and I could get a drink, and it was important to me. It was just so important. And they were gone a lot on various travels, and so I was able to get into my then brother-in-law's Scotch bottle, and I loved all that sort of stuff. And I don't remember being any particular problem. I just know that I drank whenever I had an opportunity. And I begged and pleaded and got back to Los Angeles, and I finished my last 2 years of high school at Loyola High School. And my only claim to fame there is that I came to Latin class, smashed a few times, and hung out and smoked and drank whenever I could. And I got out of high school, and I went over to Santa Monica City College, and I screwed around there for a few months or whatever it was. I don't know. I tell you the kind of a drinker I was, and this is before I was an alcoholic. I just liked to drink. I had one girl that went to Catholic Girls High, which was a school near Loyola High School. We were going out for quite a while, and I asked her to go out Friday night, and she said, "No, Tom, I don't think I want to go out with you anymore." And I thought, well, why? What's the matter? I thought we had a good time. At least I remember it as being a good time. And she said, well, I don't. She said, every time we go out, you drink too much, and then you get drunk, and I just am afraid to drive home, and the whole thing, and on and on. I thought, well, okay, you're lost, bitch. So I just found somebody else. And I found this girl that loved to suffer, and she and I got together. And I wanted to get away from her because it was getting too hot and heavy. So I didn't join the Army. I volunteered to be drafted, something that was going on in those days, and I went in the Army, and I went overseas immediately. I went to Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Kentucky, which is overseas if you're a native Californian, I'll tell you that. So I was down in Arkansas for a while, and this gal came down, and she said, well, while I'm here, why don't we get married, and I was hardly even old enough to, well, I was certainly not old enough to vote, but old enough to do anything, so I said, well, okay, since you're here, why not? What does that mean? I mean, so many people in those days, and I guess today, they put more trouble and more interest and more planning into who they're going to take to the junior prom than they do who they're going to marry. But anyway, that's what I did. And we set up this suicide pact for the next 20 years and rode the road to miserable destiny. And when I got out of the Army in '56, not only was I married to her, but I have these two babies, one getting born and one a year old, and I felt like my life was over. I felt like I was screwed. I was barely 22 years old, and here I have all these responsibilities. I'm married. I have two children to take care of, and I'm just a kid myself. I hadn't even dated, it seemed like, and here I am shackled as I felt with this responsibility, and I went back to work for my father in the electrical contracting business, which was the easier, softer way. I've always had a history in my life of going when I should have stayed and staying places when I should have left. And this went on for days and years and my whole life. It seems like it was like that. And but I had a very good sense of responsibility of how to behave and how to act. And so when I got out of the Army, I realized that drinking during the day, which is something that I did every day. I handled personnel records in the Army, and we drank in the morning and at lunch and in the afternoon, and then we'd go to the mess hall and have dinner, go shower and shave and get dressed up and go to town and do some drinking. And this is the way I spent my Army career. And what happened is that when I got out of the Army, I figured that during the day, drinking somehow didn't fit into the stereotypical idea of what a husband and a father and a manager of a business should be, and so I just didn't drink during the day. I don't remember it being a particular problem. It's just something that I did. And I had no idea I was an alcoholic. As I said earlier, I don't have any experience with alcoholism, so I don't know anything. I just can't imagine what's going on. I just know that I like to drink, and there's nothing more complicated than that. But I'm finding out towards the end of this year that I'm getting very nervous and uptight and very anxious, and certainly maybe it's because I'm high-strung. That's what a doctor said that I was when I was in grammar school. And so I started going into a bar innocently once in a while, or maybe a delicatessen, and going and order a pastrami sandwich and have a couple of beers with my pastrami sandwich. And that seemed to be a nice deal because I was kind of more relaxed in the afternoon, and I wasn't so uptight and goofy. And so I would do this once in a while. And then I found out that it was something I was looking forward to. And then it seemed like every lunch I was in some bar somewhere, because now I realized that drinking beer in the middle of the day made me sleepy, and so I started to have a couple of vodka tonics for lunch. Make them a double, if you will. And I'd be doing this, and I'd go back to work. Now, you see, I developed this kind of a shaking problem, and you can't work on hot wires and electricity when you're shaken apart, so I drank to just relax. I admit that I got so relaxed sometimes I couldn't move, but still I drank to relax and keep myself okay. And I went on this way for a long, long time, and I didn't tell anybody about it. I can't tell my wife that I'm having lunch in a bar. I couldn't tell my father that I'm having lunch in a bar, and so it became a secret thing. I've always sort of secretly envied the AA speakers and the people in Alcoholics Anonymous who were very flamboyant with their drinking. I was not. I was a sneaky little weasel little guy that hid the booze in the garage and out behind the garage and other strategic locations where I could watch my wife. She'd go to the bathroom, I'd zoom out and get a drink, and she couldn't understand why I was passed out on the couch at 7 o'clock at night, but I already had maybe a quart by that time, but she had no idea. And I went on this way, and incrementally I was drinking more and more and more, and not, I guess, even realizing it. I developed another embarrassing habit of going in these houses in Bel Air and Brentwood and the lovely areas that are in West Los Angeles and Southern California, and I'd go into these people's homes that trusted me and left me with their keys and left the keys for me to come in and do their work. And I was always prone to going into their medicine cabinet and taking things out of the medicine cabinet that do not operate heavy machinery and all that kind of stuff, just to relax and to feel pretty good. And I was doing that. And stealing booze out of their homes. And I didn't tell anybody about that until I was sober a couple of years in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, because I thought it was such a tacky thing to do. And yet I was living the life of some kind of scuzzy drug addict, and here I am, just a nice guy in the suburbs, so to speak, and I'm not that kind of a person. Here I'm acting like that kind of a person and doing the stuff that those kind of people do, and I just could not reconcile it. But I went on this way, and the marriage was up and down and fighting and not talking, which was mainly what was going on in our house. The kids were growing up, and I was getting more and more manicky and more depressed and up and down and up and down. And I'd find myself sitting in my car all alone at night, or maybe in the middle of the afternoon, sobbing and crying and beating my fists on the steering wheel, wondering what's wrong with me. Why am I so unhappy? Why is my life so screwed up? And why do I have such a bad marriage? And everything is so awful. And never having a clue that my drinking might have anything at all to do with it. Or on the other hand, I might be the wildest, gayest guy at the party, running around and zinging and running and drinking you all on the table and driving you all home, and just great times. And go figure. I just had no way of knowing what was wrong with me, and I sought the help of a psychiatrist, only to help me with my depression and this manic phases that I would be going in, and certainly the bad marriage and the problems that happened in my life like this. And I told this guy about my highs and my lows and my ups and my downs and all the bad marriage and all the stuff that we tell our doctors. And he would ask me periodically, "How much do you drink, Tom?" And I told him 6 or 8 ounces of alcohol a day, doctor. It seemed like a normal amount for a heavy drinker to drink. I'm more than happy to be a heavy drinker, because it is, after all, a sign of manhood or adulthood. For me to control and enjoy my drinking is my great obsession. I didn't quite understand that when I was controlling my drinking, I wasn't enjoying it. And when I was enjoying it, I wasn't controlling it. But I couldn't see any of that in those days, and so I had this vainless attempt to somehow feel loaded and feel all right. So I like being loaded. I don't see anything wrong with it. There's nothing better, really, when you think of it, laying on your bed, listening to some great jazz music, watching the ceiling move around, it's just great. Damn life interferes with that. You got to go to school or work or some relationship or some place to be. And I'd just rather just be laying on my back, bombed out of my mind. It was just great. But I couldn't do that. That's the sad part of my life. And so I saw this doctor about 3 or 4 years, and out of private therapy and group therapy and all the therapies you can dream up. And in his therapy, because I couldn't be honest with my number one problem, which is my alcohol, I got sicker and sicker and sicker in this guy's care. And he tried to help me, but we never discussed the drinking because it just wasn't an issue. I couldn't see how one thing had anything to do with the other. I was just miserable because of my background and my childhood, and this bitch I was married to, and these rotten kids, and this other stuff, and the kind of work that I had to do, and everywhere I was in was some sort of a prison, some sort of a confinement where I couldn't be who I wanted to be, and I never knew who I wanted to be anyway. I didn't know what all that meant. And so I just got sicker and sicker and sicker in this guy's care. But I figured the alcohol worked, and what I mean by that is that I could sit in the little club in Beverly Hills, right around the corner from my psychiatrist. I hadn't had a drink since noon now. I go in there, a little nervous. I like this bartender in the little club. He probably kept me from coming to Alcoholics Anonymous a few years before, because he told me I would never be an alcoholic because I always ate. It's something newcomers can take with you tonight. And I go in there and have 3 or 4 double scotches or 3 or 4 double vodkas, whatever I was drinking that afternoon, and I get myself together. And you feel better when you leave a bar after having a few drinks. You're kind of more together, and you look in that bar mirror behind there, and you're certainly more handsome, and you can relate to people much better. And I went to see this doctor for one of his 50-minute hours, and he looked at me and he said, "You're drunk." I said, "What do you mean I'm drunk?" He said, "You look drunk, you act drunk, and you smell drunk. I assume you're drunk." And I said, "Well, I had a couple of beers for lunch," which I think is our stock answer. And he says, "I think it's a little bit more than that, a little bit more recent. And he was going to help me with my drinking problem, albeit my non-existent drinking problem, but I'll go along with the gag, whatever." And he put me on heavy dose of Librium and heavy dose of Stelazine. And I took them as prescribed. Hell, I was so good about it, I even took them more than prescribed. I want to get well now. I want to wait around a month. And I went to see him a week later, and I said, "You know, I feel better this week than I have felt in a long time. I have a certain inner peace that seems to permeate my life, and there's a certain tranquility on the job." And he said, "That's amazing. Not too soon do people get this immediate result from tranquilizing drugs." And I said, "Well, I guess I'm very fortunate." I said, "Incidentally, I need another prescription." He said, "You couldn't possibly. I gave you a month's supply." I said, "Well, I don't know. They must be gone. I don't know what happened to them. Maybe I lost them or something." So he wrote out another prescription. I'd had his too now. I had some from some other doctors. And, you know, you learn for a while. We're kind of quick learners in some areas kind of slow. But you go into other doctors and you know the proper symptoms, and you get a lot of drugs. It's really neat. I don't know whether it's that easy today, but at least it was in those days. And so I was doing this, and I was popping these pills like M&Ms and drinking vodka and scotch to swallow it down, the whole thing. This is not even worth mentioning, but the doctor did say don't drink while you're taking these pills. But, I mean, what do they know, you know? So I was drinking and taking these pills, and I was just goofy, just zany, just gone. Working just like... One particular, now, I'll never forget this story. I got a phone call, about 10 o'clock in the morning to call this architect back. And I called this architect, and I said, "Yeah, Warren, what can I do for you?" He said, "It's okay to go ahead on the manualist job." I said, "Okay. There's a couple of small points that I'd like to go over on that." I didn't know what he was talking about. I spent a whole morning with him going over this whole lighting job in this guy's big backyard in Bel Air, and I, to this day, don't remember ever being there. And this is the way I was living my life, going in for whole days and mornings and just blackouts, and working and getting through it all, the whole thing. And it was just silly. But I figured I was doing fine. I'd drive down Wilshire Boulevard, get a little silly corner like Wilshire and Westwood about 10 o'clock in the morning, wait for the signal to change, take about an hour and a half. And I'd come to, and a lady in front of me claims I ran into her, which I suppose I could have. I don't know. I wasn't there. Come home. I'd come home some nights and rip that house apart, terrorize that wife and family. Some nights come home just as peaceful as I am this afternoon, even more peaceful. Come home 6 to 7 o'clock at night, lay down in the living room rug, take a little nap before dinner time. Sometimes I'd miss dinner, but there's other meals. And I'd get up at 11, 12 o'clock at night, go take a leak in the linen closet and go to bed, just leaving it home. My wife was losing her sense of humor over a lot of this kind of stuff, which they'll do. And she filed for divorce again, but she's always filing for divorce. Kind of a routine around our house. She's filed for divorce. I move out of the house, hang around the neighborhood for 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 weeks, 2 or 3 months, sashay back in again, have some kind of a madcap reconciliation, try to recapture what never was. It just got to be just silly. This time I got myself a one-room place right behind my favorite drinking bar called the Cork and Fork on Westwood Boulevard. And I had a sort of a routine. I'd get up at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. I'd sit on the edge of my wet bed from perspiration or what have you, and go to the linen closet and pour a long, tall drink of vodka and have another one. 8 o'clock in the morning came, and I had a half a pint to a pint on my stomach, and I had the breath purifiers on and some urine in the eyes, put the dark glasses on real fast so nobody could look at me and see there was nobody home, and go off and pretend like I was all right to work. And it worked quite well. I did this for a number of years. And I would hope I would last until lunchtime, which is something I look forward to, going sit in these bars and having a few drinks. Sometimes most of the time I couldn't get to lunchtime, because about 10:30 I'd start shaking and get that terror again. Excuse me, I'll be right back. I've just got to run down to the hardware store for something, ma'am. And I'd lay down the front seat of my car and drink a little hot vodka, and that would get the motor running where I could last until lunchtime and I could sit in these bars. Now, I didn't sit at the bar, where people like you obviously sit. I sat at a booth, and I read my Herald Examiner, had my drinks, looked at the guys at the bar, and I said to myself many times, look at those alcoholics. I knew they were alcoholics because they were in there every single solitary day for lunch. Now, the only reason I knew that is that I was in every day for lunch, but they were the alcoholics, and I'm just this poor neurotic whose wife's divorcing me. My house is put in foreclosure for non-payment of taxes. I'm losing my electrical contracting business because people don't need drunken electricians around their projects. They have sober people to do our work, and it was just hideous and horrible. And this is the way I wound up in 1965. My wife came to visit me in October of 65. She said she wanted to see me while I wasn't drinking. It was about 10 o'clock in the morning. I was home on my vodka break, actually. And she told me what kind of a husband I was, what kind of a father I was, what kind of a son I was to my mother and dad. And she told me about Christmas was coming up. What are you going to do about the kids need presents and toys and stuff? And they needed new shoes. And the attorney wanted to be paid. And they turned the gas off again. They're going to turn the phone off tomorrow. And all these mundane problems that she had. I mean, they were her problems. They weren't mine. And what was I going to do about this? What was I going to do about that? And mercifully, she left in about 10 minutes. And I just had a realization this was it. This was over with. You know, a lot of times we joke and laugh and hear about this time it'll be different, and I can handle it now or whatever. But I think if you drink the way I drank and you get to the place that I got, you realize it's not going to be any different. Tomorrow's not going to be any better than yesterday or last week or tomorrow. This is your life. This is the way it is. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And I had a brand new bottle of Seconal sleeping pills, which I had just bought the night before. And I took all of those and a bunch of scotch, and I didn't leave any notes, and I didn't make any hysterical phone calls. I just simply wanted out. Because you get to a point with your alcoholism and your drug addiction when you simply can't do it anymore. You just can't. Why? What's the point of going through this charade again? And so I just checked out. I lay down that little cot, and I went to sleep. And it's as vivid to me as if it happened last Thursday instead of all these many years ago. And a kid that was working for me part-time thought I was acting a little bizarrely, and they came to my apartment and found me in this coma. And they got the door open, I guess, and they called the ambulance, and they shipped me up to UCLA Medical Center where they pumped me full of holes, and I was to stay in this funny-looking green room, and I came to, and I thought, Christ, if they just screw this up, I can't even get out of here. Talk about bad breaks. And my vital signs came around, and they shipped me off to another mental institution. I was to stay for a while, but not for alcoholism, unrespectable suicide. And I was in there for a while, and it wasn't all that bad, really. Nobody could visit me, nobody could call me. I could sit and read my books, and I could listen to my jazz music, and I had plenty of Thorazine to keep me very tranquil. And I made my little ashtray well enough, they let me out eventually. And the first place I stopped after leaving the doors of this mental institution was Jerry's Liquor Store on Olympic. And of all the things that I talk about in this phase of my talk, it's the most bizarre to me because wouldn't you think I'd stay sober a couple of years, a couple of months, a couple of weeks, a couple of days, a couple of hours? But I know that I can't go in that little room that I'm living in naked with nothing to drink, and so I have to stop at Jerry's Liquor Store and get a quart of each so I can have my medicine, so I can be all right and just stay, because I can't be in a room by myself without my alcohol. And this is where my life had been reduced to in those days. And I tried to go to work on Monday morning, and I got in the fourth rung of the ladder to change some light bulbs, which is not overly technical. And I couldn't do it. Didn't drink enough that morning, and I was still kind of shaky. And I said, Mrs. Pauly, I'll be back another day. I've got the flu or something. I forget what it was. And I checked in with another psychiatrist, this one 5 days a week. And if you're wondering how I'm affording a psychiatrist 5 days a week, I'm not. My daddy's taking care of me. I'm only 32 years old. I can't take care of myself. I can't pay my bills or any of that kind of stuff. And so he was paying every morning. He would see me coming to work late because I would have this psychiatrist appointment. He said, well, what do you say about you today, Tom? Like I'm going to have some revelation or something. He said, how many more years am I have to continue to bail you out, Tom? And I felt like such a little boy, like such a failure. And that's what I was. And I didn't know what I was going to do about it. And I just continued to drink, continued to work, continued to go this way. I spent a miserable Christmas or a holiday season, actually, because I didn't want to be around anybody, because it wasn't that I wanted to be by myself so I could drink. I just didn't want to be around anybody because they all knew that I was some kind of a mental patient, that I just kind of a mental institution, and I was crazy, and I just wanted to be by myself. And I got through the holiday season. I went to Mass on Christmas of 1965, and I asked God to grant me some peace. I didn't want to quit drinking because it wasn't an issue. but I wanted to sleep for more than 2 hours at a time. You see, when you drink the way I drink, I'm drinking a little over 2 quarts a day just to stay even. I'm getting drunk anymore, particularly. I'm just somehow maintaining this miserable existence, but somehow so I can just move around. But when you drink the way I drink, you pass out, which is really a blessing. But in 2 hours, I'm wide awake, just like I am this afternoon. And you have to drink some more and pace that room back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and drink some more so you can pass out again and maybe sleep another 2 or 3 hours and wake up again and do it all over again. And this is the way it was in 1965. And I asked God to grant me some peace. And 2 days later, my prayer was answered, although I didn't see it as such. But I woke up one particular morning and I went to my linen closet and poured my morning drink and had another one. 8 o'clock in the morning came and I had a half a pint to a pint of my stomach. I went and put the bottle of vodka back on the top shelf. And I noticed a bottle of Ballantine scotch had about that much left. And I thought, Christ, that's a lot of scotch since 8 o'clock tonight. It was remarkable how much I was drinking, yet it was no more or no less than I'd been drinking all the way along, but it was kind of like shown to me. And I went to the phone a few hours later and I called Alcoholics Anonymous of all places. And I went to a meeting that night at Ohio Street, and I sat in the back of the room where you're supposed to sit when you're new. Don't get too close, and don't pick up any coffee cups or think you're a member. And sitting on my hands, I had dark glasses on, which kind of a dead giveaway. I had green slime coming out of my mouth from the breath purifiers I was chewing, so nobody knew I was drinking. Sitting on my hands, some guy raised my hand as a newcomer, which I don't think was very nice. I don't know how he knew either, but... I walked up to a man who was going to be my sponsor, and I said, excuse me, sir, you seem to be some sort of a big deal around here. How do you join Alcoholics Anonymous? How do you become a member? And he says, you don't drink, kid. And I said, yes, I'm planning on cutting down. And he said, no, you don't have a grasp of it. We don't drink here a day at a time. It's very easy for you to say. Apparently you're sober sometime. But I can't go a whole day without a drink. I tried it one day in July, and it damn near killed me. Well, he thought that was so goddamn funny, and he got some of the guys he sponsored and some of his friends. It's kind of true. You can't exploit and make fun of the new people. What good are they? And so I went back to my psychiatrist and told him about these insane AA meetings and these bizarre stories and these crazy people. And he said not to worry. And he reached in his drawer and he pulled a whole big bag of Librium and said, here, take these. They'll get you to the rough spots. I thought, great, no problem. I made this mistake of sharing this with my soon-to-be sponsor. He informed me if I was going to be a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, as opposed to one that just didn't drink. But if you're going to be sober and be in a position to work this program, we don't drink here a day at a time. We don't take pills that affect us from the neck up. We don't shoot non-habit-forming heroin. We don't smoke marijuana. I guess if you came in today, they'd tell you to cut back a little bit at least on your cocaine and crack. But... to be sober is to be sober is to be sober. It's hard to get that concept, and I could not get that concept. I don't know what he was talking about. You know, you don't drink a day at nothing at all. You know, I mean, I couldn't do that. You see, I can't get out of my room in the morning. I mean, I do electrical contracting work as I did then as I do now, and I go to see people in their homes or their businesses or whatever it is, and I have to appear to be all right, kind of together, find out what they want, make some suggestions, tell them what's going to cost or whatever it happens to be, and you can't do that when you're shaken apart and you're sick and crazy, so I got to have a few drinks to kind of relax and look like I'm all right. But so I can't get out of my room in the morning unless I take a tall glass and put about 4 or 5 fingers of vodka in there, put a little orange juice in there, make kind of a health drink out of it, and drink it down, hope it'll stay down, wait for it to work, and it doesn't work right away. I need something a little bit more immediate. And so I take another little shot, and of course I'm drunk, just like yesterday, just like the day before, nothing's changed. And I can't get this concept, and he convinced me that I could get out of my room in the morning. And he walked me through this, and I was able to get in my car, as shaky and crazy as I was, and get down to Santa Monica Beach, and I walked on the Santa Monica Beach all that morning and shaking and sweating, and every nerve ending in my body's calling out to give me some booze, give me something, and I didn't drink all that morning or that afternoon. Of course, I drank Carol syrup and ate Hershey bars and drank Cokes. I probably should have died of a diabetic coma, but somehow I didn't take a drink all that morning or that afternoon, and I went to that meeting that night, and I realized I was sitting in this meeting. It was the longest time I'd been without a drink since I was a junior in high school, and I thought, how amazing, how miraculous. And a day at a time, I've done little else and just get this guy as a sponsor and come to Alcoholics Anonymous and stay away from the first drink and just delay it. There were many times that I needed a drink or wanted a drink or should have had a drink or whatever it may be, and I just delayed it. I just didn't take the first drink. I put it off to the afternoon or till after the meeting or tomorrow or till after dinner, and I just kept putting it off and putting it off. And last January when they called my name from the couple of home groups that I'm very active in. They gave me a cake with 31 candles on it. And you can't stay sober that long. Anyone that needed to drink, you can't applaud me for a gift that I got. You just can't do that. You can't applaud me for a gift that I got from God. Because there's no way anyone that needed to drink, wanted to drink, and had to drink the way I drank to make that statement. But a day at a time, I have just not had a drink. I've not had any drugs or anything like that it's affecting the neck up, because I've just did it one day at a time. And I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, like I said, and got this guy as a sponsor. And I got very active on the program. Went to meetings every night during the first year of my sobriety, and pretty much during the second year of my sobriety. My wife and I reconciled. I had some idea that she was going to go to Al-Anon and get the kids to go to Alateen and Alatot and get the dog to go to Alapet and all that other stuff. But it was not going to happen. She couldn't see the need for Al-Anon. Her life, it was, after all, my problem, and she was going to continue on with her psychologist. And we had a certain amount of a honeymoon, I guess, in those first few months. And I have very little memory of that first year or so than just getting up in the morning and coming home and getting cleaned up, getting something to eat, go down, help set the hall up, which I know a lot of us do at our home groups, and stay for the meeting, help break the hall down, go sit in those stupid coffee shops all night long, go home and sleep real fast and do it all over again the next day. And this is pretty much the way I spent the early years of my sobriety. And I'm sure to the detriment of my family, I suppose. My mother said to me when I was sober 2 years, "Why do you still go to all those meetings? After all, now that you know the error of your ways," as she put it. And she just didn't understand that I needed to completely immerse myself with the people who were trying to do what I was trying to do, and just get that action back and forth. I see Ken in the audience, and his brother Arlie. He was so kind to me. He had about a year more than I did, and he would say, "Come on, Tom, let's go to the coffee shop," or "Come on, can I help you with this?" And this is the way I was taught when I was just a little boy in this program. I was 32 years old and crazy and insane and just couldn't imagine not drinking. And here people were asking me to go out and do stuff, getting involved and all that. And I went to this for quite a while. I guess the honeymoon was there for several months. It was nice to have a sober daddy around the house, have a sober husband and all that. And I came out of a meeting one Friday night in the summer of '66, and I was just as crazy as I have ever been since. And I was just goofy, I think it was a full moon night, or maybe that was the problem. Anyway, I went down to the beach, and I walked around the beach trying to sort it all out, trying to figure out what it was all about, and I couldn't figure it out. I went to my sponsor's house quite late that night, drove up on his front lawn, knocked on his door. He came out and said, "What are you parked on the front lawn for?" I said, "I haven't got time to park the car. I got to talk to you now." And I was just crazy. So I had to park the car in the street with the rest of the cars, and we sat and talked. It was bothering me, and we couldn't put our finger on it. I'm a very pragmatic person. I mean, I want to know what's wrong, and we'll fix it. Just let me know, and we'll fix it. And sometimes life isn't that black and white. There's a lot of gray areas, which I have difficulty with, but there's a lot of gray areas. That's what life is. It's rarely ever all black or all white. And so he helped me with this, and he suggested and cursed me, and against my better judgment, I had to go home and start this fourth step. And I didn't think it applied to me, and I don't mean to be funny that way, but I really didn't think it applied to me, because I felt one of my problems in life was too much introspection. There was too much examination of conscience and confession, if that's what you want to call it. I just thought I was doing too much of that. And he made me go home and start this fourth step. And I was able to put in that fourth step things I was never able to tell a Catholic priest in confession, because they were too tacky, too embarrassing, too sinful, if you will, things that I couldn't tell a psychiatrist. You can't tell them that kind of stuff. They'll think you're crazy. So you've got to be very guarded what you tell people in that venue. But in Alcoholics Anonymous, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start, and put all that stuff down. Put those secrets down. Put those things you're never going to tell anybody about. And by all means, put those goals down and find out those good parts. There's a lot of good areas about Tom Whalen that are worth holding on to. They're good qualities and stuff that should have gone before this time, but I figured, well, after the first month or so doing this, I'll be practically a saint. And I looked back embarrassingly a few years ago. I was thinking I should have had all that taken care of in my first year or fifth year or 10th year, and now the decades have gone by, and I'm still working on stuff. It's stuff that I don't know, I used to be able to get away with it, I can't get away with now. And you keep uncovering and discovering and discarding, as Chuck used to talk about, and that's what this program seems to be all about. My favorite meeting of all time is my Monday night step study meeting in Laguna Niguel. It's right about a half a mile from my house, and I love that meeting because I have a lot to share there, because I've been sober a long time, and I know how to stay sober. I may not know very much, but I do know how to stay sober. But what it does for me, primarily, it keeps me right in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is the 12 steps. It keeps me in there going over this kind, not just reading about it, but just really doing the steps and doing the inventories and the making the amends and all the stuff that we do. One of the problems that I've had most of my life is turning my life, my will at the care of God. I remember when I was sober a couple of years, our house was put in foreclosure yet again. And there was no way I was going to get it out of foreclosure, and it was just every door had slammed, and I ran out in the backyard screaming my top of my lungs, shaking my fist at the sky, saying, "You want the goddamn house? Take the goddamn house. If it's so terribly important, my sobriety, I suppose. Thy will be done," and all that. And well, I kept the house, and I started to pray for things. Prayed for a brand new Chevy van once. And I got it right off the bat. The only trouble was my higher power didn't send up enough work that season. They came and repossessed the damn thing, which taught me to go back to praying only for the knowledge of His will for me and the power to carry it out. But I just found out recently, you talk about slow learner, I just found out recently that I've had the third step prayer. It's been answered with me because of all the difficulties that I have been through and all the years of my sobriety. I've come through them all, and I am an example that this program works because of God's love and God's grace and God's help and all this sort of stuff. And it's funny, a lot of us, I think, are that way. Some pick up this program real easily and real fast. I'm really a slow learner as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, I looked around and I figured I had all these amends to make. And I made the list of people that I had harmed. I didn't mind walk up to somebody and say, "Hey, I'm sorry, just kidding." But when it came to my money and my business, it was a whole different ballgame. I mean, and besides, why should I incorporate my business or my marriage into my program? I mean, what does God know about running an electrical contracting business? He didn't have electricity in his day. What does he know about that kind of stuff? And as far as managing that wife and family, walked around the desert in that muumuu, how would he know about that kind of stuff? And so I started to pray for things and the whole thing, and that went by the board after a while too. But it just takes a lot of learning. I used to think that if I could just get a year on this program, I'd have it just really wired. That's the little electrician's talk. And or 5 years or 10 years. And all of a sudden I found out just embarrassingly again, just a couple of years ago, that we're just on a journey. We're not going anywhere. The highest you can get here is sober. And so you're just moving on. Anyway, my wife looked around, and she was going along with what the kids were doing. What the kids were doing, they were getting loaded all the time. And they were hopeless drug addicts in junior high and high school, and it just broke my heart. I thought, how can this be? After all I have been through, why should they have to suffer with this? And so I didn't know what to do. And I was just devastated. I thought, why couldn't they learn from my experience? And of course, that's pure folly. And I watched them sell drugs out the back door, and they play that goddamn music all the time. You couldn't walk in the living room without getting contact high. It was just... Anyway, my wife and I, she filed for divorce in January of '74, and at that time I moved down to Dana Point, where I live near now. And as I was driving down the freeway, I was thinking, am I doing my will or His will? You're around here a while, you don't want to screw this thing up. You want to do it correctly. And so I said a prayer that my sponsor gave, share it with you. It goes like this: God, I have no idea where I'm going. I do not see the road ahead of me, and I cannot know for certain where it'll end. Nor do I really know myself, and the fact that I think I'm following your will does not mean that I'm actually doing so. But I believe this. I believe the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope I have that desire in everything I do, and I hope I never do anything apart from that desire. And I know if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it at the time, though I seem to be lost. In the very shadow of death, I'll not be afraid, because I know you will never leave me to face my troubles all alone. And with this, I continued on down the freeway, and of course, immediately I told him what kind of apartment I wanted. I want the business to be run. I got a nicer apartment, a lot less money, and the business went along all right. It was really terrible in the early 70s when I was down there, but I figured I could starve to death in a nice area of town, a nice area of the country than Los Angeles, and so early 80s were kind of bad, and then the business got real good, and then it was terrible in the early 90s, and I'd like to say the early 90s, and now it's all of the 90s, but it's... But, I didn't know any of this kind of stuff. I had a lot of problems in my life. In the family, I had some deaths in the families and some disappointments and some resentments and things like justifiable resentments. I want to make that clear. And I was finding myself deeper and deeper and deeper depressed. I didn't know about it. My wife didn't even know about it. She knew there was something wrong with me, but it was just something wrong, and I just more and more depressed. And I got so bad that somebody who seemed to know better said, you know, you really would be better off on some sort of medication for your depression. And I said, well, thank you for sharing, but that just isn't my style. And I toughed it out. I just got through it. It took about 4 years, and then I came through it just like you do. Just ups and downs and highs and lows and good times and bad times and successes and failures, and you somehow get through it. If you just don't take a drink, if you just hang in there with your Alcoholics Anonymous people and just somehow suit up and show up and get through it all, because that's what life's all about. I have the advantage, or disadvantage, of being old now, and I've been a lot of experience of being sober a long time in the program and being in life a long time, and that's the way life is. It's ups and downs and all that other stuff that I just finished saying. And if you can understand that, I know so often I feel like I want it, and I want it right now. I don't want to be screwing around with anything. And I think one of the reasons I would have been maybe a more successful man, a more successful businessman, if I had been a little bit more patient, a little bit more soul-searching when I was a young man. But of course, it's all pure folly now to even joke about that. It's just the way it is. Anyway, I started a date when I was down in South Orange County, and I found this lady that we got along with real well, and we fell in love, and we started a date, and then we broke up, and then we went back together again. And I went to visit her in South Coast Hospital when she was having a radical mastectomy. I said, where are you going to move to? And she said, well, I don't want to go here, and I don't want to go there, but I said, come home with me, and I'll take care of you until you get well. So she moved in with me, and of course the relationship intensified, and we were ultimately married. And we had a good relationship. And it was not easy, I don't think, but we had a good relationship. I think she really resented my 2 alcoholic drug addict sons, and of course I resented her 3 daughters and a son who are not much better condition than my kids are in. But of course, my kids had really special problems. Her kids were just scuzzy drug addicts, as far as I'm concerned. We worked through all of that and got through it all, and the kids are coming in and out of our house in the various stages of stonedness. It was a joy to watch, I'll tell you that. My youngest son fell out of a second-story window, stoned on angel dust and some cheap wine. And I went up to visit him in General Hospital, and I said, Jim, this isn't much to shoot for. He's all in traction and broken up. I said, why don't you get out of this scuzzy city and come on down to Dana Point, and I'll put you to work and get yourself an apartment. Oh, no, he's having too good a time. So he stayed up in Los Angeles. He did come down about a year later, and he went to work for me, and he stayed sober in front of me, at least as far as I know, because he knew that I would not tolerate having anybody in my business or around me that was loaded all the time. But he got picked up one Saturday night for drunk walking, and when he got out of the Santa Ana jail, he realized he had to quit drinking. And Clint Hodges and I and my son Jim were having lunch one day in Tustin, and he said, Jim, why don't you come to the Wednesday night meeting tonight where your dad and I go. Our best speaker was talking that night, Norm Alpe, and he thought he'd enjoy it. He came to the meeting just for entertainment value, for no other reason, and he loved it. And he came back the following week, and he said it was a newcomer. And yesterday I called him and wished him a happy 18th birthday. And my oldest son, December 1st, got 14 years on the program, and Gloria, my beautiful wife's son, has got 9 years on the program. So I'm very blessed. I've got all these sober kids now. And I'm thinking about starting my own organization. I'm going to call it APAC. It's Alcoholic Parents of Alcoholic Children. Hey, I want to be a victim just like the rest of them. It's not my fault. Drugs and alcohol don't agree with you? Don't do it. You know, so anyway, I watched this lady that I was married to, my first wife. She had a lot of emotional problems and stuff like that, and we were, I guess, divorced about a year, a little less than a year, and she somehow, the voices were talking to her, and she became delusionary, and she got a hold of a .38, and she shot herself in the backyard of our home up in Los Angeles, and it was a devastating experience to go through. It was tough on her, too, I mean, admit, but I'm talking about from my aspect of it. And she was in like a 7-hour surgery, and she survived that. And I've often thought, you know, it's too bad she could never have gone to Al-Anon and found Al-Anon and found some way of life which she would have felt useful and had a decent life. It's kind of sad. We in Alcoholics Anonymous make our amends and do all that sort of stuff, and lots of times we don't get all those kadoos and all those applause and stuff like that. It's just like, we just do it. These are the steps we take, not the steps that we're going to be appreciated for. So anyway, we go through all of that sort of stuff. And my second wife, Colleen, she suffered with cancer for 9 years that we were together. And, I was thinking today while Diane was talking about Annie, it's remarkable what this program did to keep her alive 5 years longer than she was supposed to, because she was always out there trying to help other people and do stuff for other people. And what can I do for you? How can I help you? Come on over at the house and we'll talk and all that kind of stuff. And somehow she's existed that whole thing after about 7 surgeries and constant chemotherapy and radiation and all of that. She passed away the day after Christmas of 1985. And when that was over with, I just thought, what does this mean? It was just, I was devastated. I thought, this can't be, because I turned my life and my will up to the care of God, and she's supposed to be all right. She's supposed to be alive. She's not supposed to die. And of course, that again is silliness, and I went through a bad time over that. But it taught me one thing. It taught me about the third step, is that, you turn your life and your will up to the care of God, and do the best you can, suit up and show up, and whatever it is, work or home or family, whatever it happens to be. Just turn it over, and it's going to turn out the way it's going to turn out. And we have very little control over, and I guess no control over, the results of stuff like that. So I think it made, in some respects, a little easier for me to do a third step than it would be for somebody that hasn't had these sort of experiences. But you just go through all that stuff. And I took a year off. I went to meetings. I did my work. I took a couple of trips, but I was just unhappy that whole 1986 was a bad year. I had no joy at all, but I did not let it react on me. I just suited up and showed up and went to all that stuff and listened to these stupid newcomers I was talking to and guys in the program with their mundane problems. And my cat ran away, and I'm thinking, I'm a new widow here, a widower, and it just made no sense to me. But my contact with alcoholics and keeping going and doing that sort of stuff and sharing kept me going that whole year. And I got through 1986, which we do. You get out of stuff like that. You just come out again. And I was thinking yesterday, listening to Jim Shaw's daughter talk about her dear father. He and I were newcomers together. And I was an electrician, he was a plumber. And we used to do work on jobs together and all that kind of stuff. It was just a riotous time, I must say. And he just figured, well, if I can be an electrical contractor, he figured, well, he could be a plumbing contractor. So he went to school and got his license and all that sort of stuff. I had a lot of wonderful, fond memories. It's just being here this weekend and seeing a lot of guys that I used to know in those days. Some are gone now and some have just moved away. But anyway, I digress for a minute. I looked around March of 1987, and I saw this beautiful blonde lady getting her 5th cake, and I thought, now there is a classy-looking lady. And those of you that know Gloria know what I'm talking about. And I called her sponsor on the phone the next day, and I said, do you think it'd be all right if I asked Gloria out on a date? She thought it'd be a good idea. And so we went out on one date. We've been together ever since. And we have a wonderful relationship. We have a lovely home and a beautiful garden, and life is marvelous for us. And how it happened, I don't know, because business has been terrible, and it's just the way it is. But you just suit up and show up and go through stuff, and life just seems to happen. It just seems to work out. And we've been through a lot of stuff together, and good times and bad times, but mostly good times. We're very much in love with each other, and we have a great life. I was remarking recently about all the guys I sponsor. It just seemed like relationship seems to be the big deal with most of these young people that I seem to be working with. About a year and a half, I guess, maybe 2 years ago now, they all got the marriage bug, it seemed like. One guy got married, and it's working out very well, as long as they keep going to their weekly therapy session. Another guy called me met me after the meeting. He said, oh, by the way, I'm getting married. And I said, oh, I didn't know you were dating. And he said, oh, yeah, I'm marrying so-and-so. I said, wasn't she the girl that just stood up as the newcomer tonight? He said, yeah, but we got all that worked out. And I said, yeah, I'll bet you do. Well, had a bad marriage, I guess you could say. They didn't get along more than 15, 20 minutes, as far as I could see. It's all going to be different when they get married, I think. I think what happens to a lot of guys, especially this guy, I think he realized he was over 30 and he thought, I'm not married. Want to get married? You know, whatever, what? They have a baby now and they're going through a divorce and you just think, oh, nothing. Another guy who should have known better, it's over 14 years, he called me on the phone. He was all excited. Oh, I'm getting married. So-and-so and I are getting married. I thought, you've only known her for 3 months and you haven't even gotten along in that 3-month period. He said, oh, we got all those problems worked out. I said, yeah, I bet you do. She had one little tiny problem, and it's hardly even worth mentioning, but I have a little time to tell you about her problem. A little tiny jealousy problem. She didn't want him going to those A&A meetings. Well, there's women there, and you know how you are. And so she would drive him to his one men's stag meeting a week and pick him up, of course. If that's not a marriage made in hell, I don't know what is. Well, they're getting a divorce, and I hope it sticks. I've gotten so jaded and so bad lately, I'd rather go to an AA funeral where there's some hope. But, anyway, I've had a nice afternoon. I've had a wonderful week here. My wife and I like to thank you again, Bob, and the committee for this wonderful opportunity. And I hope you all just live a day at a time and stay out of the wreckage of your future. Thank you very much.